Hello there folks and welcome to a new Formula E podcast, and today it's time for the review of the two Berlin ePrix races from Berlin. The Berlin, I believe it was a World War II airfield, which is very interesting, but onto the racing obviously. We had two races this weekend, the third time that the Formula E's done this since we had two in London. We've had two of those in London, haven't we, or just the one? It's just two, isn't it?
Two, yeah. Season finale, so this is basically just to kind of make up the numbers at the end of the season because there's so few locations and quite a few dropped out, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. I think Brussels dropped out. There was a few that dropped out, wasn't there, anyway? But anyway, on to the race. So we had two races and we're going to try and cramp all of the talking points in today's video. So talking about race one a little bit first. Obviously, if you haven't heard about it, Felix Rosenqvist got his first win and Mahindra got their first win in their Formula E history. But, you know, Mahindra had a good weekend generally because they got second in race 2 and they got a double podium in race 1 with Nick Heidfeld finishing third. So let's talk a little bit about Mahindra before we get on to Renault and Abt, which are the big sorts of talking points. Obviously, Rosenqvist didn't put a foot wrong all weekend. You know, a second row start for race 1 and pole for race 2. And he led all of race 2, and what the shame was that was due to the penalty he dropped to P2 in the end. But Heidfeld had an issue on day 2 but still salvaged a point in the end. And the question is really, obviously, the championship's tied up for this year. It's between Buemi and Di Grassi. But for next year, can the team come really good, and do they have the lineup to challenge at the top?
Yeah, definitely. It really came together for them finally this weekend. We've kind of seen flashes of real kind of brilliance throughout the season. Rosenqvist arguably should have won his maiden Formula E race in Hong Kong. Didn't quite work out for him on that occasion, but it certainly worked out for him on this occasion, at least in race 1 anyway, and really should have got the double win. He probably would have won that second race without that penalty. You know, Buemi was close behind and possibly backed off when he knew Rosenqvist had a penalty, but, you know, he seemed to have the supreme pace all the way through. Seemed to have the better of Nick Heidfeld as well. I mean, Heidfeld was, you know, right up there with him as well, of course, which, you know, really defying his elderly age. And, you know, they are just a really, really good lineup, a great mix of experience and youth. And, yeah, I definitely agree. They could be contenders next season. And, hey, Rosenqvist could be even a surprise championship contender this year. You never really know. He's not too far off Di Grassi, and, of course, Buemi's missing New York. So nothing's quite out of the question yet. And in the constructors as well, that they are looking very, very strong. So, yeah, a fantastic weekend for Mahindra, and finally that the hard work is really paying off.
It'd take something good, though, wouldn't it? Terrific from Rosenqvist to win the championship now.
Yes, and a whole pinch of luck as well, but he's certainly going to try.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on to Renault Edams, and it was a real turnaround for Buemi. After the first race, he qualified in 14th, and had a fantastic comeback to P5. Little did we know that about 10 o'clock on the evening, it was announced that he was disqualified, meaning that he lost all those points. And it was a bit of a disaster due to illegal tyre pressures. But in the second race, as we just discussed, he beat Felix Rosenqvist due to a second penalty due to an unsafe release. And the real question is for Buemi, because we're not really going to talk about Prost much. We know the situation that he shouldn't have the drive there, but, you know, whatever, we'll just gloss over that. But for Renault, was the win essential for Buemi after yesterday's setback and, you know, losing those points to Di Grassi?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. I mean, at least a podium, I think, really had to kind of go on today. I mean, the pace wasn't really there on Saturday, certainly not in qualifying. But, you know, it was just a fantastic recovery for him in race 2. And of course, the disqualification in race 1 was through no fault of his own. So, you know, once again, it didn't take long for Buemi to get back to his kind of dominant ways. And, yeah, another fan boost win as well. And those bots are serving him well, but... you know, Buemi just doing another really top job and extending his championship lead in race 2, which was important, of course, after it was cut in half after race 1.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. You know, Buemi doing really well to come back in race 2, and unfortunately in race 1, but, you know, what can you do? Bit of illegality from Renault, but there we go. But Nico Prost, not a great weekend, bit of a standard weekend. Nothing standing out really, was there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for Prost this weekend and the most interesting thing was the fact he got a 2-year extension. So for season 4 and 5, which I thought was a bit rash from Renault to sign him for another 2 years. I mean, another year perhaps, that's okay, but another 2 years, especially with this kind of rumoured Nissan takeover, was an interesting one. But yeah, he's scored points every single race he's been in this season. Still no podium, that still evades him. So yeah, like you said, it's a Prost weekend.
Absolutely. Now on to Audi Abt, then the third team out of 10. And in both races, Degrassi and Rosenqvist were the only two to finish on the podium in both. And it was a fantastic weekend and just what he needs to keep with Sebastian Buemi. Daniel Abt, the second driver, really picking up some solid points also. The question is, because we've got a little bit of an anticlimax in the last two races with Buemi missing the final two rounds, will Degrassi win the championship by default, or is it not as easy as that?
Oh no, definitely not as easy as that. There's still quite a substantial gap in the championship. I think it's about 32 points. Obviously he's got two races to close it up, but there's no kind of guarantee that he will do that, especially if Mahindra and Virgin are coming on strong. Then Degrassi might not even get on the podium, although I think that's pretty unlikely. He probably will. So yeah, I think another double podium will be needed in New York. That would then put Degrassi ahead of Buemi, and then he's got to have the tough task of kind of beating Buemi in Montreal. Of course, both New York and Montreal new to the Formula E calendar, so it's just two massive unknowns, and I can't wait. But if Buemi does what he's done early in the season and wins both those races in Montreal, then no matter what Degrassi does in New York, I think it's still Buemi's title to lose, in my opinion. But the ball is now in Degrassi's court to go to New York and really take that advantage in the championship and build an advantage also, not just take the lead, but get, say, a 14-point gap, I think would be decent. But he's basically got to win both races in New York. So I think double podium is the kind of more reasonable expectation, with one of those hopefully being a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, apart from Rosenqvist, who drove fantastically this weekend, out of the two title contenders, who would you say was the driver of the weekend?
That's a tough one. I'd have to go with Degrassi, to be honest, because Buemi had that awful qualifying. He got out qualified by Prost on Saturday, but the way he came back on Sunday was great. So both of them were fantastic. It's great to see that they really are the class of this Formula E field. I think we can maybe start to throw Rosenqvist in there, but for me they're still head and shoulders above the rest, and they have been pretty much since the midway point of season one. They've really, really stood out and just continuing to do that this weekend. So yeah, neither of them actually my driver of the weekend though. I would say Rosenqvist is the driver of the weekend, but out of those two, which was a question you asked, I'm going to say Degrassi.
Short and sweet there. Bit of sarcasm.
As always.
Yeah, absolutely. But on to the fourth team then, Virgin, and a bit of controversy surrounding these two drivers. Points were both in both races before we talk about this collision. And the pace looked good. Sam Bird tweeted, I think, that the pace was good, but unfortunately not so good in the races. But both of them made it to the Super Pole in both races, with Lopez missing out on pole by, well, nothing. I think it was a thousandth in race one, which is absolutely bonkers. But you've just watched the second race. Obviously, I watched it a little bit earlier, but there was a collision in race two. Whose fault was that? Was it Lopez or was it Bird?
It's got to be Lopez. You just kind of drove into Bird. I mean, it wasn't on purpose. I hope not. But I think he just kind of outbroke himself. It's one of those things in racing. It was unfortunate. Bird got pushed wide, lost a couple of positions, kind of lost momentum and lost a couple more. Probably a bit of confidence as well. But yeah, that's probably Lopez's fault. Really a clumsy weekend for Virgin. Not to get a podium out of this weekend is a bit of a disaster after the pace they showed. So yeah, really disappointing. And I think they're going to rue that mistake really, and lost a lot of ground too. I guess you could probably now say their rivals, Mahindra, are probably their biggest rivals in the championship, and they've lost a lot of points to them this weekend. So really not a good weekend, because they finally delivered in qualifying. We've seen race after race they seem to struggle after showing really well in practice. But yeah, it was a races really. They had no pace and they drove into each other. So yeah, clumsy all round really.
Is it a bit worrying that Bird kind of struggled in Super Pole though in both races?
Yeah, definitely. There seems to be some kind of warm-up issue there. I think they were 1-2 in qualifying before actual Super Pole, so there's clearly some issue there, I think, to Cheetah as well. Stuff from it seems to be kind of probably a car problem, a team problem with certain teams, just can't quite kind of replicate those conditions, and yeah, just really seems to struggle in both the race and Super Pole.
Yeah, and as you say, to Cheetah, we'll talk a little bit about Cheetah now. It was a great weekend for Verne, obviously marred by a 5-second time penalty in the first race, due to unsafe release, a little bit like Rosenqvist in the second race. So he was demoted from P5, where he finished quite solidly, to P9. But that would probably be P8 after Buemi's DSQ. Don't quite know how that worked. But he finished in 6th in race 2. Sarazan getting used to the car and getting a highest of P11 in race 1. And we talked a little bit about Buemi and Degrassi being far beyond any other driver, but would you say that Verne's been the third best or not? Do you think it's been a good season and a good first season for Cheetah overall this season?
I would say no, to be honest. Verne just seems to kind of struggle with energy management. He's got the kind of ultimate pace, but he just can't really deliver in the races on a consistent basis. The same that kind of Buemi or Degrassi can, or maybe not quite like, some like Felix Rosenquist can. I think Verne's definitely up there and possibly having the potential to kind of grow into something more if he really works hard on that kind of energy management, possibly over the winter. And of course, it's a long winter. I say winter, it's kind of autumn really, but you know what I mean. The kind of
we go to Australia and it'll be winter. Yeah,
the gap between the seasons is quite large, so I think that's definitely an area he needs to work on. And Techeetah are learning, of course. But you look at Verne's teammates this season, and he's destroyed every single one who's stepped into the sister car. So yeah, on one hand, Verne maybe should have got more from this season, but on the other hand, his team's a bit sloppy, a bit inexperienced. So yeah, I think you've got to kind of weigh the two up. But he's certainly up there, possibly on a kind of a level with Sam Bird, maybe just below. They were teammates last season, and Bird fared the better. So yeah, I think the best is yet to come. I would hope from Verne. But really, it is the races and the energy management that really kind of holds him back. I mean, Lopez has come into that car, kind of come into Verne's car from last year and doing a really good job against Bird. So I think really Verne, Lopez and Bird, they're all kind of in a row in the championship and they're all pretty equal, I'd say, in terms of ability. So that's a pretty interesting one. And there seems to be a bit of a grudge match, I think, between the three of them because, yeah, they as you kind of saw, they weren't showing too much kind of kindness to each other. No kind of waving each other through. It was all kind of elbows out.
Yeah, agreed there. And another former Formula 1 driver, as well as Verne, is Nelson Piquet Jr., who drives the next ever along Oliver Turvey. And Turvey beat Piquet this weekend, not necessarily quite comprehensively, but well. And Turvey got some points in both races, I believe, 9th and 10th. And it's the contrast we're usual we've seen beforehand. I remember discussing with, I think it was Nathan a few races ago, that maybe Piquet is simply that driver 1 and Turvey's that driver 2 figure. But is this a surprise, or should Turvey just be credited for the good work he's done this weekend compared to his teammate?
Yeah, I don't think it was much of a surprise, to be honest. I mean, certainly on the basis of the kind of last 4 races, Piquet's definitely on the upper hand. He seems to have kind of found something and got a bit back to his kind of season 1 form at times, but still nowhere near that kind of championship potential. And really, I mean, his big trait early on was kind of his energy management, but really, I think we were kind of talking before the show, but really the kind of strategies and energy saving and kind of trying to do something different with the pit stop isn't really possible. So I think that's possibly Piquet's kind of lost that shine. He was never the fastest in terms of ultimate pace, and Turvey, is kind of been right with Piquet from day one, really, I'd say, and right from when he kind of stood in, I think it was kind of at the end of season 1 it might have been, and when he made his Formula 2 debut, he was right with Piquet. So he's always that bit behind, doesn't quite get the big results, but gets consistent results, and that's what he did this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, and good to see a British driver perform well in the Formula as well. But on to Jaguar, who also have a British driver in Adam Carroll. Not really a brilliant weekend, but the highlight of their weekend being the fastest lap for Evans in race 1. Got a highlight there that he did DNF and he suffered damage, I believe, at the start, so he just went for the fastest lap to get, I think it's 2 extra points or just the 1, but it's points anyway. But he got a P9 qualifying in race 2 as well, so fairly decent. But would you say now that I think I've spoken about this to you before and you've disagreed with me, but would you say now that they're ahead of Dragon and Andretti in terms of performance or not?
That is a tough question. I'm just going to avoid that question completely, like Theresa May, and let's just talk about the drivers. And Mitch Evans is way ahead of Adam Carroll. I think Carroll's in a lot of danger, and these next 2 races are probably going to be his last in Formula E because Evans is just doing a fantastic job. I mean, we talked about this last time, I remember, with the fastest lap rule. I think it was with Joe. What's the point of it, really? Because we kind of get these second races where people can just kind of back off, or if they have damage, and just kind of have this second race, almost, in kind of a qualifying session to get this fastest lap. It seems a bit silly. I mean, if you're running outside the top 10, why don't you just pull into the pits, get in your other car, and try and go for the fastest lap and just, put the energy to full blast. So I think it kind of defeats the purpose. I think we need to kind of tweak it to maybe where I think what GP2 does is, or Formula 2 now, you've got to be inside the top 10 to get that fastest lap point, and I think that's probably what they need to do. But yeah, Evans leading the charge, Jaguar making progress, and yeah, okay, I do agree now, they are ahead of Dragon. I will say it now.
That's good to hear.
At least for now, yeah.
So would you agree that Jaguar are strong and stable, or would you say they're a bit weak and wobbly?
Well, it's their first season, so I think it's more Dragon. That they should be a lot further up. Jerome D'Ambrosio, I think, staying on for next season. That was also announced. We'll get a lot of kind of silly season stuff going on over these next 2 rounds, because it was a bit weird. We've got kind of nothing announced about next season, but I guess that's because it's all the way in December. Season 4 starting a bit later than the previous seasons. But yeah, back to Dragon. Yeah, miserable season for them, and that kind of continued this weekend. They were pretty much nowhere. They really kind of struggled on the surface. D'Ambrosio got a drive-through penalty in race 2. Should have got a point there. Didn't quite come off for him, so not a good round for Dragon. Not really a great round for Jaguar either. They should have got a lot more out of it, but Evans certainly did a good job. Andretti as well, they really struggled. They should have got a lot more out of it than they did, but really they were just nowhere from the off. Really struggled in race 1. Tried to do something different with the strategy, and that completely failed. Franz and Da Costa, of course, doing their kind of usual good job, really hustling that car, but just with no avail. I mean, Da Costa's got 1 point finish this season, and that's a travesty really for someone of his talent. Same with Franz as well. I mean, if I was those two, I'd be looking elsewhere for next season, because really that Andretti project is just not where it should be. That they're a really good team, Andretti, really experienced, and a lot of people there that should be doing a much better job. So yeah, both Dragon and Andretti with a lot of work to do.
Yeah, definitely covered Andretti and Dragon there. And really the highlight for Dragon this weekend was a decent qualified, I believe, in race 2 for D'Ambrosio in P10. I might be wrong, it might
10.
be race 1.
Yeah.
But Andretti, it's similar for both, isn't it? They haven't really got the
They're
machine
both
to
American.
compete.
Just happens to be both American, yeah.
I suppose a bit like Hillary Clinton, but they've got the drivers, but a shame that the car isn't good enough to compete, definitely. And we've kind of covered those 2 teams, so the only team we haven't really covered and talked about are Venturi, and it's a poor reliability for Engel in race 2, really the story of his season, to be quite honest. And after Buemi's disqualification, a good 2 points for him in the first race. Tom Dillman went back in the car after the appearance in Paris, that's right. Actually overtaking from Mauro Engel, who missed the round. And his highlight, Dillman, was 2 P15 qualifyings and P15 in the second race. And the real question is has Engel outperformed the capabilities of the car this year? Because he's beat both his teammates, whether that be Sarrazin or Dillman this season.
Yeah, definitely. Engel's been a right old surprise. I mean, in terms of rookies, I think we knew Lopez and Rosenquist would be fast, would be really good, but I think most people kind of wrote off Engel because, including myself, they'd never even heard of him. So, I think Engel's done a great job and he's really put himself on the map. Probably still a bit underrated. I think most people probably will kind of forget about him still, but I think once he gets a car to kind of deliver those top results, and of course he did get a 5th place in Monaco, so, when kind of Venturi get their act together, and they're probably the worst team in Formula E right now, once they get their act together, then Engel will definitely get the goods delivered. And I'll just talk quickly about Sarrazin as well, of course, who used to drive for Venturi, switched to Cheetah. Didn't really go well for him this weekend. I mean, you said, of course, he's getting used to the car, which is fair enough. So we'll see how he fares in New York. Won't judge too quickly, but the early indications aren't great. And Dillman, a bit of a shame, really. Paris, maybe a flash in the pan. Because he had a pretty miserable weekend in Berlin, but again, we'll see with him. I think there's a lot of potential to come for Dillman. I think he got a bit of contact in both races, I believe. So yeah, a bit of a sloppy weekend for Venturi, and they could have done with a good result around here, but still, like I said, got 2 points, so not a complete disaster.
Absolutely. So let's do a little preview to New York, which is going to be quite tricky because they've never driven there before. I haven't seen the circuit. I don't know about yourself, but it's the first race in North America since Long Beach last season, and it's going to be tough to predict, but most Formula E circuits are obviously similar. They've all been street circuits of some form. Top 3 prediction then for New York.
Oof, that's it.
Obviously for both races, just put it as 1.
Right, okay. Yeah.
No pressure.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm just looking at the track map now, and it does look like a good circuit. I think it's really cool location, so it's gonna be a great event. That's my prediction. But no, I'm gonna say, I think I said 1 win apiece with Degrassi and Buemi last time. So
interesting.
I'm gonna say for this time, I'm gonna go with Buemi is not gonna be there, so he's not gonna win. Rosenquist is he gonna get another win? I'm gonna just say Rosenquist and Degrassi to get a win each. That's my prediction. I'm going to give you. I'm not going to give him a top 3. I'm just going to say Rosenquist and Degrassi.
Wow, that's fairly conclusive, and it's going to be an interesting weekend, isn't it? Obviously, the first time they've been there. Is it interesting to see them go to North America for the last 4 rounds, or do you think it'd be better to go to London, or do you think it's a good move to go for
New York,
2 circuits?
I mean, it's and a Battersea Park or New York.
Well, that's a good point. To be fair, definitely.
Some
obviously, Buemi, Lopez, yeah.
Some park in London or the New York. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and obviously Bird, Lopez, and Buemi all to miss the next round, and that isn't for another 3 or 4 weeks yet, and none of the announcements, replacements have been announced.
Yes,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, 2 new drivers for Virgin. I'm gonna guess Alex Lynn will drive for Virgin with him be the reserve, but no other real names being plucked out yet. Maybe Oliver Rowland. I think he drove in season 1. Did he?
I think he might have Formula 2 though. One thing I would like to raise rather, is I wonder if anyone's going to switch teams to try and get in that Virgin team or that Renault team. Is anyone going to kind of in the Dragon team, perhaps in the kind of Andretti team? Will they be able to kind of squeeze out of their contract maybe just for a round in a different team? Kind of maybe quit the team and kind of set up for next year. I'm not quite sure. Probably unlikely because the teams are pretty stingy, and what happened to Sarrazin was actually pretty fortunate, but I think it's been investigated now, so teams are probably not going to do that. But yeah, in terms of other names, Alex Lynn, like you said, is probably our only solid prediction really. Maybe Roland, maybe Robert Kubica, but who knows?
Oh, maybe. Well, we'll talk about that in the next F1 podcast, but that's it for the Formula E podcast today. Really quick summary of the Formula E2 races there. If you did enjoy that, make sure to leave a like and share the video. And we will see you in about 4 weeks' time. I believe it clashes with the Silverstone weekend, this race does. So I don't think I'll be attending, unfortunately. But apart from... brilliant. But apart from that, we will see you at the next podcast. So we'll see you later. Bye-bye.